The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
In the early years in America, in the year 1912, so there were immigrants from Eastern Europe. They came and they lived in the Lower East Side, and it was a family by the name of the Parnases, not related to Rabbi Parnas, who was a Rosh Yeshiva here, but a very chashuva family. He was a Hasidic Yid, and he and his wife, and I believe they had 8 children. They lived in one of these tenement buildings in Lower East Side, an apartment, and he was one of these people that I'm talking about. He got a job on Monday morning, he got fired on Friday. Got a job Monday morning, got fired on Friday, but eventually, you get blacklisted. People know, oh, you're a Sabbath. It's clear that you're going to be Shabbos. They know. All the employers started, talking to each other, and they knew exactly who to hire, who not to hire. Not going to train you another week and then only have you leave. So he basically ran out of options for Parnasa. It's an amazing thing. It's a real life crisis. And what happened was that, like I said, it was in the middle of the winter. He wasn't paying his rent. Rent in those days was $5 a month in an apartment in the Lower East Side. And he couldn't even come up with that. He tried to do odd jobs and this and that. He wasn't able to feed his family and keep a roof over his head. All because of Shabbos. So the landlord sent the superintendent to evict him. You don't pay your rent. You haven't paid for a couple of months. You're out. Today you could sue and go to a court and landlords and tenants and this. You don't have, that didn't exist. You didn't pay the rent. Goodbye. You're out. So imagine for a second, Rabbi Parnas with his wife and 8 children, and they're standing on a cold, snowy street in the Lower East Side of Manhattan without anywhere to go. They didn't have an in-law to go to, a parent to go to, a relative. They didn't know, they were immigrants. They just came. And they literally were freezing. And the landlord, the superintendent of the building, a non-Jew, and to his great credit, he said, listen, Rabbi, I'm not the owner of the building. I would let you stay. I'm under strict orders to evict you, but I can't stand to see you out in the street. You and your family, you're good people. Says, if you want, you could sleep down in the basement of the building where I sleep. It's not fancy. The boiler room is down there, and the boiler was heating coal. And so the whole apartment, the whole downstairs was all basically one big fog of black coal smoke and dust in the air. But you'll be warm and you'll have a roof over your head. That much I could give you. I can't give you food. That you have to, but I could provide you shelter at least until you find another way of supporting yourself. It's an amazing chesed. Anyway, so that's what they did. They took all their pekalach and they went down to the basement of the building, and that's where they lived. Now, a couple of days later, these Hasidic kids, they came up to play ball out in the street. But they didn't look like white children, they looked like black children because they were all covered in black. They were fully black. And they were speaking Yiddish to each other. That was their language. So they're playing ball. They looked like black children playing ball, speaking Yiddish. And there was a very aristocratic Jewish man, not religious. You could see he wore the American attire, very, spitz. And he passed by and he notices a strange sight. And he says, just to nobody in particular, just to himself, he says, only in New York can you have black kids that speak Yiddish. So one of the kids opened his mouth and says, we're not black. We're regular Jewish kids. That's why we're speaking Yiddish. He says, but you're black. He says, no, we're not. So why are you black? So he explains, our father Shem Shabbos, and they evicted us. They put us down in the basement, $5 we couldn't come up with. And this Yid had a good heart. And he says, do me a favor, ask your father to come up. I want to talk to him. It's an amazing story. This is the most amazing story of all time. Never forget this story and repeat it to anyone that you see. So he says, Rabbi Parnas comes up, and I guess he also looked black, and he says, Shalom Aleichem. He says, what's your name? He says, Mr. Biston. Mr. Biston, what can I do for you? He says, well, I spoke to your children. They told me this terrible story, how, you're Meiser Nefesh for Shabbos. You gave it for Shabbos, and you don't have, a normal house to stay in. He says, I want to pay to buy you an apartment. I'm going to give you $500. Now, $500, then you could buy an apartment building with. $500 was a few $1 million today. It was an astronomical amount of money. I told you, $5, you were able to live in an apartment for a month. So you can imagine what $500 did. And he says, I want to give this to you, and I don't want you to suffer anymore. I want you and your family to live decently and get yourself a job, and now at least you'll have a roof over your head. So he says, I appreciate the offer, says Rabbi Parnas to Mr. Biston. He says, but tell me something. This $500 that you so generously are offering to give me, and I appreciate it, was it earned with Chil Shabbos? Were you Mechal Shabbos to earn this money, yes or no? He says, yes, I was. So he says, let me speak to my wife first. He had the kids call up their mother, and they huddle. So listen, he offers $500, but, the reason why we're in this situation in the first place is because we want to keep Shabbos properly. We don't want to get any hana on Shabbos. And by taking this money, we're undoing everything what are we doing? How can we do this? She says 100%. To her great credit. Imagine the Mesiras Nefesh that she had to have. And so they look at Mr. Bisson, thank you very, very much. We're going to decline your offer because, we can't take money that was produced on Shabbos. So he gets furious, and he's like, there's smoke coming out of his ears, and he in a huff and a puff, he leaves them, crazy greenhorns. They came to this country and and he goes storming into his apartment. And his wife sees that he's all upset, and she says, what's wrong? So he says, these immigrants, Rabbi and family, I so generously offered to give him $500. They're living in a basement, in a soot-filled basement of a tenement building, and I offered they could buy their own building if they want, and they turned me down. Well, why'd they turn you down? Listen to this one. Because I got the money with Chil Shabbos. She said they're 100% right. So remember a couple of years ago, we came over to these shores, and we were Shomer Shabbos, and then we decided that it was impossible. We couldn't go on the Mizbeach of Shmir Shabbos. We weren't able to be Meiser Nefesh. And we said that someday we're going to come back, but right now we have to temporarily do what we need to do. And therefore we started, being Mechal Shabbos. You opened up your business. It was successful. And they're sticking to their guns, and we never did. So shame on you. They're 1,000% right. She said, so what should I do? She said, go back to him and tell him that you're going to be Shomer Shabbos from now on, and beg him to take the $500. So Mr. Biston makes a U-turn, and he goes back to the Parnases, and he says, Rabbi Parnas, my wife and I understand what you're saying, and we accept, and we want to, from now on, we're going to be Shomer Shabbos, and please take the money. Please take the money. He says, no. The money was still earned on Shabbos. He says, you go back, you work now with Shmir Shabbos, you earn another $500, then I'll take it back. Then I'll take it. But this old $500, I'm not touching that money. That money, give it to somewhere else. I'm not taking that money, because you go earn another $500. And that's what he did. He went back, he earned another $500. He gave it to Rabbi Parnas. Rabbi Parnas bought a building in Borough Park. He opened up the first Hasidic shtibel in Borough Park, and the first chassid in the shtibel, Mr. Biston. And the families, both of them, grew together, and there's many Einiklach that are all Shomer Torah mitzvahs and Meiser Nefesh and building beautiful Peridika homes, but with tremendous Mesiras Nefesh.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org